I always think of the masculine as a cup of water, or a cup with water in it. So the masculine is the cup, and then the water is the feminine within. So the cup really offers a support. It offers structure. It offers form. So without that cup, the water just is kind of formless and everywhere. So we really need the masculine containment so that we are safe, we're protected, right? The masculine is the protector, so that we have the ability to be free in our feminine. So if you don't already have that in your life, you will show up in your masculine in order to compensate for that lack, so that you're safe first and you're protecting your feminine.
Welcome to the Well-Nourished Mother podcast. This is a show for women who desire a deeper, more mindful and meaningful pregnancy, birth, and motherhood experience. In this space, we bring so much reverence to the rite of passage that is the maiden to mother journey. I'm your host, Lauren Fortuna Flock, founder of Nest and Nourish. I'm an ex-nurse turned birth worker, holistic nutritionist, and somatic coaching student with a fiery passion for birth prep and motherhood prep that blends the head and the heart. Join me for inspiring conversations with experts, mothers, and all-around badass wise women, exploring all the ways we can nourish ourselves, body, mind, and heart, in pregnancy, birth, and motherhood. This space will help you cultivate the knowledge, practices, and resources you need to be the most embodied, vibrant, authentic, intuitive, and well-nourished mother you deserve to be. So welcome. Let's do this. Welcome back to episode 15. 15 episodes in, that's wild to me, but welcome back. Thanks for being here, for listening. Today on the show, I'm joined by the incredible Beth Wood. And honestly, you might want to grab a journal or a notepad for this one if you can, or you might want to just re-listen to this a couple times, because she is going to blow your mind with some incredible knowledge and wisdom. Honestly, this is the stuff we should all be learning, like in school, about ourselves, about our bodies. Maybe one day, but today we are talking about the different energetic and hormonal seasons of our monthly cycles. We're diving into feminine and masculine energy and the differences between the two and how to balance ourselves out. And we're really talking about the power of aligning with and honoring our female biology instead of constantly fighting against it and ignoring it. For me, I know that I've been living in a very energetically masculine way for so long, hustling hard, never resting, just really trying to force things to happen how I want them to. But through my own birth and mothering experience, and of course the changes with my work and job, I've really been able to really start to play with this idea of honoring my cycles and the energy shifts that happen. And it's been a beautiful practice. It's allowed me to really bring more awareness to my own body and my own fluctuations and my own needs. I was one of those people who absolutely hated my cycle, my period, when I was young. I thought it was like this terrible jail sentence that I just had to get through for the rest of my life. It wasn't until probably my mid-20s, once I got off birth control, that I allowed my hormones to regulate, and I started to really notice the fluctuations and the different phases, and even began to really enjoy them. And after I had my baby, I really started to miss my cycle and those fluctuations and energy shifts. I felt like I was kind of energetically stuck without them. And actually, Beth will explain a little bit about the different seasons of pregnancy and postpartum too, which I just find so fascinating. And this all can really help act as this guidepost, and it allows us to really settle into each season and not try to force our way through it or try to, act like it's summer when really it's our own inner winter, and the focus should be more on rest and that deep underground work. So anyway, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, keep listening. Beth is going to lay it all out for you. So who is Beth? Beth Wood. She offers integrative life coaching and business strategy for women looking to craft a life honoring their cyclical nature and feminine design. Her programs are designed to help you learn how to dance with your incredible menstrual cycle that nature has woven into the feminine, so you can tap into abundant creativity, businesses and success, efficiency, attention to detail, better health, glowing skin, and so much more. She supports her clients in leaning back into their feminine nature, cycle syncing, seasonal living, and feminine-based business. So I was introduced to Beth through a Mother Mind, which is a mastermind for mother entrepreneurs, hosted by my very good friend, Nicole Pasveer. Hi, Nicole. It's called Recalibrate, and it's amazing. Go check it out. But yeah, she was like, Beth was a guest workshop host inside Recalibrate, and it was incredible. I took pages of notes. I was in awe of her passion and knowledge, and I just knew I had to get her on the show to share her wisdom with you all. So I really think you're going to love this one. When we start working with our biology, instead of constantly pushing up against it and hustling and trying to show up like men, it truly can change your life. This connection between our cycles, our hormones, our nervous system health, you'll see in the episode, it's so interconnected. And we have so much power as women to really lean into this and use it as the superpower that it really is. So buckle up. It's a good one. All right, let's get into it. So Beth, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. To get us started, let's dive right in. Can you share, it's my favorite question to ask everyone, can you share a word or phrase to describe your current season of womanhood?
Ooh. I would say this is actually kind of like a life phrase that I come back to all the time and it always sticks. I have it tattooed on my body. And it's insai, and it's an Icelandic word that essentially means the sea within. So it's kind of like this limitless inner world, and then to use that and apply it to your external world. So it's the sea within, to see within, and then to see from the inside out. And so it's using everything about your internal world to apply it to your life and to your community and to your work. And so for me, that's very applicable because I use everything on like a micro and a macro scale. So when I'm experiencing something happening internally in my own inner seasons, I also see it in my external seasons in nature and in my life phases and things like that. So I would say very much I'm in like a fall, autumn kind of phase in life. And in my body right now, ironically, and just kind of in general. And then it's also autumn here in Montana. So I feel like that word and phrase kind of applies all the time, and I stick to it.
That's beautiful. I love that. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are, the work that you do, and what lights you up?
Yeah. Oh gosh, so many things light me up. So to kind of summarize it, I would say that my whole mission in life is to just bring women back home to themselves, back home to their bodies. And so that came through a whole series of events, as most of these things do. It's been a decades-long process, but as a general focus right now, it's to really help women understand how their bodies work as women with these beautiful internal seasons, with our infradian rhythm, our menstrual cycle, and how different that is from a man's biology and how beautiful it is and what the gifts are in that. So that's kind of a foundational component to my work. And then beyond that, it's helping women create businesses that align with their biology, with their feminine on like an energetic level, but then also biologically with their infradian rhythm, with their menstrual cycle. And then also somatic work. So I'm a somatic coach, and I support women in really understanding this beautiful mind-body connection, and freeing themselves from deep-rooted subconscious beliefs that are affecting their health, that are affecting their success, their behaviors, and really working in a holistic mind-body way, because we are not separate. Everything is connected in our bodies. And so I like to look at bringing women home to themselves in a super dynamic way, from body to business to mindset, relationships. It's kind of the whole kit and caboodle. So it's a vast body of work, but those are kind of the three pillars that I work with right now.
Amazing. And I'm also a somatic coach. So I get so excited when I meet someone else who's doing this work. And I know there's different types of coaching and different modalities and people to learn from, but it just encompasses so much. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful way of coaching. So I'm very excited about that. So can you tell us a bit more about the infradian rhythm and, what are the differences between, that's a big question. What are the differences between men and women?
Sure. Yeah. How long do we have? Yeah. Okay. So as kind of a basic understanding, Women are lunar, men are solar. So women's bodies operate on a 28-day hormonal rhythm. So where men get a 24-hour hormonal rhythm, so they have a boost of testosterone first thing in the morning, we only get a boost of testosterone once a month, and that's around our ovulation. So the way that our energy works is so different than a man. So where a man can show up the same every single day because his hormones show up the same every single day, women don't have that. We have 4 distinct phases. So I liken these two seasons in nature. They're very similar. We have very similar energetic kind of expressions within our body. So we go through an inner winter, which is our menstrual phase. That's the time that we're bleeding. And then after that phase, we go into an inner spring, which is our follicular phase. And then that kind of leads us into our inner summer, which is our ovulation. And then after that, our hormones start to come back down and we move into our luteal phase, which is our inner autumn. So every single month, we go through these 4 different phases. And each one has a really beautiful gift. So depending on the hormonal cocktail that we get in each phase, we have some really powerful gifts for each one. So a lot of women think that, like, oh, men are so lucky because they have a ton of energy every single day. And while that's true, they do have a very specific type of energy every single day. We have some really beautiful energy that just changes it's like the tone of the energy just changes from week to week. So when we start to tune into that and we understand what those different energy shifts are, we can use them for our advantage the way that we naturally would in nature. So it's really a powerful way of living once we understand that it's actually really beautiful the way that our bodies work as women.
Yeah. And I think just hearing that difference there, that men are on this 24-hour cycle and women are not, we're on a month-long cycle. I think that right there is like, that was eye-opening for me. And even, as a former nurse, like I kind of knew this, but I never really let it sink in and let it allow me to realize just how different we really are, and how it's incredible how we're trying to act as men, right? We're trying to keep up. We're trying to work the same way. We're trying to be, productive, air quotes, in the same way as men. So I think that right there, I think is going to be something that a lot of women just pause and go like, hey, wait a minute. Like, you're right. There are big differences here. So now that we know this, we know that there's these huge differences between us. Can you kind of take us back to basics here? So what is cycle syncing?
So cycle syncing is a term that was about 10 years ago, a gal named Alyssa VT dubbed this as a term. So it's actually a trademarked term. But the idea behind cycle syncing is it's a very rigid structure, and I'll explain that in a second. It's a very rigid structure for women to know exactly what they need to eat each phase, how they need to exercise each phase, what's happening in their body for each phase, how their intimate, like their sex hormones might change, how their libido might change, body composition, all sorts of things. So it's this really calculated structure that helps women understand and align with their menstrual cycle. I personally don't love the method of it. I think it's a beautiful starting point, but I really believe in more of an intentional approach because our bodies already know how to do this. So we use the method in my work. We use that cycle syncing method as a way to kind of just learn the language a little bit more and really get you a starting point. But then beyond that, your body knows what to do. When you start really this is why I love somatic work. When you really start to access the body wisdom and this deep ancestral knowing that we have that's literally written into our genetic code, we don't have to try so hard to check all of the tasks off of the list for every single phase, because that's exhausting. And that's not how we work in our feminine. Our feminine is not something that wants to check things off of a list. We want to embody. So it gives us kind of a foundational understanding, but that's not the end point. That's just the first step. And cycle syncing really is, it can be very limiting for a lot of women because they feel like they have to do so many things. So I like to just dispel that right out the gate. Like I usually recommend you just start with understanding your menstrual phase and taking some rest and starting there. And then add in what's important for you. For me, I have always intuitively eaten. And so I don't feel the need to get into a nutritional blueprint or plan and like be really rigid with that. And same with exercise. I know what my body's energy needs every single day. So I really encourage women to go with the energy that's present and know that their body is going to talk to them. And so I kind of bridge cycle syncing with this more intuitive approach to make it applicable for women and for our feminine and the way that we really work.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I think when there is such a rigid, like, this is supposed to happen in this phase of your cycle, you can start to feel like, well, if that's not happening, then I must be doing something wrong, or there must be something wrong with me. And then it's leading you further away from your body rather than reconnecting. So can you tell us a little bit more about each kind of season or each energy phase of the lunar cycle, the women's cycle?
Yes. Oh, I'd love to. So, okay. So let's start with our menstrual phase. So this is the time when you're bleeding. And I'm not going to give like, this is how long it will last, because really every woman is different, but that's the first phase that you go through while you're bleeding. So that's pretty easy to identify when that's happening. And we use the first day of your bleed as day one of your menstrual cycle. And women, the typical, like if we were to look at like the quote unquote ideal menstrual cycle, it would be 28 days, but anywhere between 25 and 32 is very normal. That's average right now. So day one of your bleed, that's the first day of your menstrual cycle, and you're in your menstrual phase. This is your inner winter. So what's happening there is all your energy is very inward. It's just like winter outside, right? So in the winter, the trees have shed all of their leaves and all of their nutrients come back into the trunk to really root down and send those nutrients deep so that they have that energy for the spring when it comes to come back out and blossom, and all that energy comes back out. So the same thing is happening in our bodies in our winter phase of our menstrual phase. So you'll notice you have a lot lower energy. This is when all of our hormones drop to their lowest point. So it is very normal to not have energy. It's very normal to want to sleep more. You need more calories. Your digestion kind of slows down a little bit. So it's better to have warm foods, easy to digest foods. You're not going to have a whole lot of external energy because all of the energy is inward. So this is a time when you might be processing more emotions. I like to say the veil between the subconscious and the conscious mind at this point is really thin. So you might have more emotional experiences because your subconscious is allowing you to get things out of the system that need to be resolved. In the same way that our uterine lining is shedding, our emotional, psychological lining is also shedding the things that we don't need anymore. So it's all this really powerful energy that is inside. And so this is not the time that I usually recommend like wanting to go and do a bunch of stuff, not networking. You just aren't going to have the energy for it necessarily. And this is also likened to a postpartum phase. So you also go through a very similar energetic experience postpartum, where it's kind of an extended winter phase for a couple of months, where your body is just recovering, recharging, processing the birth, right? You're in this reflective state, and then planning for the next season. So you're not taking action on any of those things, but you're very introspective and kind of like plotting it all out. So this is a good time to like journal or anything like that. So that's kind of your menstrual winter phase. Then we go into our follicular phase. So this is when the egg is getting up to that state of maturation before you actually ovulate. And this is your inner spring. So assuming you have taken some rest around your menstrual phase, your spring phase, you have a building of hormones. And I like to think of this as a transition phase. So you might experience, you have a very specific type of energy that is kind of like turning the car ignition on. So it's not necessarily like foot on the gas pedal, but it's getting you going. It's kind of like you're coming out of that winter cave and you're starting to actually see the sunlight again. And you're like, okay, I kind of have energy, but everything feels a little crazy still. So you might have peaks and valleys within that phase of energy. So as that energy is building, you might have a couple of days where you're like, okay, I'm like really focused and I really want to go hang out with people and network and all of that. And then if you overdo it, sometimes you'll end up feeling like you want to go retreat again. And that's normal. So you have these fluctuations in that phase. But in this stage, you're in this like very creative energy. And so you're probably going to get a lot more ideas. This is really when you plant the seeds, right? In spring, you plant seeds, but you're not necessarily harvesting them yet. You're not necessarily like nurturing them a ton. You're just kind of planting seeds. So this is a really good time to brain dump ideas. It's a good time to put feelers out for projects, or if you're needing a new babysitter or anything like that, like this is a good time to do that, to just kind of put feelers out without actually engaging a ton. It's just kind of like testing the waters. So your follicular phase is a really good time to plant the seeds, and give yourself lots of grace for that ebbing and flowing energy. And then we move into our ovulatory phase. And our ovulation, the actual action of ovulation is a 24-hour thing, but you have the energy of ovulation for like 3 to 5 days. And this is when biologically we are literally more tuned to be magnetic. Our eyes dilate, our voice lowers, we get more sultry, our skin's more glowy. Like we're biologically tuned to be more attractive. So this is when, if you are like an Instagrammer, this is a good time to like film content, do anything that's outwardly facing. This is a good time to have difficult conversations because your communication is really, really primed. You have really good communication at this point. And you're in that like deep, beautiful creatrix energy. Like you can nurture those seeds, water those seeds, like see what needs to happen. You can plan, but your attention to detail is not that great. It's a lot more broad. And so you don't want to be doing like your taxes or any kind of fine tuning things. This is not the phase to do that. So you need a lot, you have a lot of energy. This is a time if you do want to do like HIIT workouts or anything that takes a lot more energy, this is a really good time to do it because your body is like asking to be pushed a little bit. So that's a really powerful phase. And your ovulation, and I didn't mention this about your follicular phase. Your follicular phase just before ovulation is very similar to the first trimester of pregnancy. It's kind of that springy energy where you're not sure, depending on if you have, like morning sickness or your energy is kind of fluctuating because your body's regulating with this new little person. So it's trying to kind of gauge like where the energy is and what's going on. So that's very normal for first trimester. So I usually recommend you use the principles for the follicular phase in your first trimester, same kind of situation. Whereas ovulation is very similar to second trimester where you're like, oh my gosh, I have energy again. I want to go do the things. I'm going to like prep. I'm going to go hang out with people again. Like I feel like I've kind of regulated and stabilized a little bit for the majority of women. Obviously, this is like very blanketed. And so that's a really good time to really walk in that like beautiful creatrix energy where you're feeling just more glowy and you're like ready to just do life again. Then we move into our final phase, which is our luteal phase. And this is our inner autumn. This is very similar to the third trimester. So you have a really similar, you go through kind of a mini nesting period, the same way that a woman in her third trimester would go through, where you're like, I know that there's this impending drop of energy and like, I'm going to need to recover. The birth is coming. So I need to put all of my resources into preparing for that. So it's this really preparative energy. And so you might want to deep clean your house. You might want to, you're going to resolve projects. So if you've got things that are still going and you really want to like wrap them up with a pretty bow, this is the time to do it. Your attention to detail is heightened. And so your senses are heightened. So this is where barrages of questions from your little people might feel really overwhelming because your literal physical senses are heightened. But this makes you really effective with detail-oriented tasks like deep cleaning, where you're like, you notice every single speck of dust and you're annoyed by it. That actually serves you in a really cool way because you're able to rally and get that stuff done. So you get this really cool burst of energy, but it's just a very different type of energy than you had maybe in your ovulatory phase. And again, you can, if you've been pregnant and you know what that third trimester is like and you go into nesting mode, that's the same type of stuff that you might want to do in your luteal phase. And this is right when the veil between the subconscious and the conscious mind thins. And so what happens is the subconscious pushes everything that doesn't need to be there anymore into the conscious mind so the conscious mind can analyze it and then release it. So if you've got, again, this is because you have that attention to detail and that heightened sensation, that's what serves you and allows you to remove things in the subconscious that you don't need anymore, that's not serving you. So this is a time, like as a somatic coach, this is a beautiful time to do somatic work with your clients because it's really easy to access deep-rooted stuff. Whereas in other phases, it might be harder and you might have to take longer to like really get into that space. So if you are experiencing a lot of emotions in your luteal phase, that's actually okay. And the more we honor those things and the more we don't judge them and we recognize that there's actually a lot of beauty in that, that allows us to have a maintenance every single month to process our emotions and not let things compound. And this serves you in pregnancy so that you don't have the same type of emotional upset all the time. It serves you in menopause because that is that final culmination of all of these phases. and your body will push anything that isn't resolved into your menopausal phase. If you haven't done this work in menopause, that's when the majority of my clients who experience really tumultuous menopausal states are women who have not honored their cycles. So the more you do this work, it's maintenance, it's keeping on top of all of those experiences and sensations so that you can step into this next phase, whether that's postpartum, whether that's your menstrual phase, whether that is like the next phase of your life with really clean and clear energy. So your luteal phase and your menstrual phase are super duper duper important, and ones to really maximize as best you can. So those are the 4 phases.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like everything you've said kind of normalizes and gives language to what a lot of women kind of know about their bodies already. But again, it's like, how do we fit into this culture of, this patriarchal culture where none of this is like, very openly talked about or accepted. We're all potentially working jobs or working places where you're just expected to be there every single day and, perform the same way. So I love this, but how, like practically, how as women do we start to like have these conversations with our partners, for example? Because even I've noticed, I've started paying way more attention to my cycles, and my husband, like, I know there's a gap there. I know I need to teach him a little bit more because I'm like, well, this week I'm not up for, doing all the things that I was doing last week. And it's like, well, why? I have to do the same things every single day, So it involves like communication and So how do we fit into this patriarchal world when we're trying to reconnect to this more feminine kind of experience?
Yeah. So there's a couple things there. One is changing the question from how do I do it to how do I be in it? Because the feminine is about being, the masculine is about doing. So the more we come from the approach of I have to do the things, I have to explain it, I have to teach, that is actually you in your masculine. But the feminine energy comes first, and she informs the masculine to respond to her. And so this is where it gets a little bit more into like the energetics of the masculine feminine. We dictate the aroma. I have a friend who calls it the aroma of the home. Women set the tone of the energy, and the masculine responds to that, which is really powerful. So it's not as much that, yes, there is some education that we can offer our husbands so that we're like, they often don't understand their own hormones. They don't understand that they have this, I mean, they probably know if they are men that they have a testosterone boost in the morning, but that might be as far as it goes for them. They may not understand that as that testosterone starts to wane over the day, then they become more social. And then by the end of the day, they don't have that testosterone in their bodies anymore, which is what makes them feel totally tanked and want to just veg out in front of the TV by the time they get home. So you can explain it like that, like, hey, so you have the same thing. You know how you feel at the end of the day where you're just exhausted? That's how I feel over the course of like about a week or 3 or 4 days or whatever. And so this is how I'm going to honor it. And you set that tone. You are the one who, as you honor your body, the masculine loves to support. The masculine just wants to respond. But if you are coming from a place of masculine, it's going to feel like resistance to him. So a lot of it has to do with how you come through it and how you be in it. And so much of it too is the way that it's not that women don't do things. It's not that, like women are hard workers. We do a lot of things, but it's how you show up to those tasks that really makes a difference. So even for employees or, stay-at-home moms who are like, I don't have a business, I don't have whatever, how you show up to the things that you do have to do makes a huge difference. So I always describe it like doing the dishes, right? That's like a non-negotiable in the world. We have to do that. But showing up and grinding through it and just trying to be as efficient as possible and like feeling really rigid with your jaw clenched, that's you being in the masculine in a task versus doing the dishes and feeling the water go over your skin and really tapping into your senses and allowing your mind to wander and be in that creative zone, maybe lighting a candle, creating the atmosphere, right? For a supported feminine, that's you being in your feminine versus doing the task from a masculine place. So there's a lot of intricacies in that too. And your awareness of your cycle and just honoring, how do I need to show up today that's going to honor me? Do I have this really cool ovulatory energy that makes me super communicative? And like, if you're going to have a conversation with your husband about this, do it in your ovulatory phase. So, you know how sometimes I feel like I just stumble over my words and it's really difficult to get things out? That's because my hormones are super low. Whereas right now it's really easy for me to communicate. And I'm learning that about myself. So I wanted to share that with you. Have you noticed that? Like, do you notice these types of little changes in me throughout the month? I'd love, like, just come from a place of curiosity and connection, because that is your gift as a woman, is like, you have a really strong sense of connection and he will respond to that. So a lot of it is really changing the tone and not worrying so much about, like, it's a patriarchal society only because men didn't know any better. They didn't know how to create something for women. So we get to take that back and recreate something different, but you have the creatrix energy in you. As a woman with a womb, you literally are the portal from other dimensions into this present reality. And so you have the ability to create whatever you want to create. And so really, really allowing yourself to be empowered in that and start seeing how he responds to you when you come from different energies. Play around with it and see what happens. And that's just kind of fun. Just come with curiosity and see what happens.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love how right off the bat there. Well, the feminine is being and the masculine is doing, and it's true. And even, how you mentioned, when you're doing the dishes, I started laughing because I was thinking of myself and how I do the dishes sometimes is like, oh, I need to do 6 things at once. So I'm going to put a podcast in my ear, consume some kind of like productive thing I need to listen to while I'm doing it, while I'm also like listening to music in the background. It's just this like mess of distraction. And instead of just being present and being in the moment and lighting a candle, that's beautiful. I love that. Can you, now that we've talked a little bit more about these energetics of the masculine and the feminine, can you talk a little bit more about like the differences there and just a little bit more?
Yeah. So I like to think of it as like spermy energy versus eggy energy. That's a really good way to describe it. And I don't know where I heard that. I know I heard somebody else coined that, but that always comes to me. So if you think about spermy energy, it's very targeted. It's very linear. It's very one-track minded, right? So men are like, I have this specific box that I'm in right now, and that's all I can think about. Women process information 5 times faster than men, and we also multitask. We don't have the box brains; we have spaghetti brains. So the way that we multitask, because of the way that our brains work, we have more developed frontal cortex. So there's all of these different biological things that happen that make us work very, very differently. So where men are really linear, very task oriented, they feel more supported in, like, they need to know that they're respected, that they have purpose, they want to protect, they want to provide, they want to contain. Whereas the feminine is the receiver. It's the eggy energy, right? So she is open, she is receiving, but she has really strong boundaries to know like to filter what she's receiving. And this is why boundaries for women are really, really important. So if you just have like this open, boundaryless experience and energy, you're going to be infiltrated by everything. And that's why a lot of women are like, I'm an empath. You are a female, you have a feminine energy, and you haven't created safety boundaries for yourself. So the masculine also shows up as the boundary. He basically comes in and creates a boundary between the evil in the world and the sacredness of the feminine. And so having that masculine containment is so important. So we need those polarities. So with the eggy energy, again, it's all like she magnetizes things to her. She doesn't go out and seek. She doesn't go and it's less like, it's a little bit less goal oriented. It's more just like, I'm open and I'm resonating and I'm bringing things to me. Whereas the masculine goes and expands territories and, has like a very linear approach to goals. So there's these really different kind of dynamics there. The masculine, again, is about doing. The feminine is more about being. It's a lot more energetic, kind of woo-woo with the feminine. It's very like esoteric, for lack of a better word, but also the feminine is very deeply rooted. So we have in different, we have like the Mother Gaia, and then we have Mother Earth, and we've got these different, the feminine rising, and then also like this deep rootedness in the feminine. So she creates her own polarity within the feminine. So you have this deep rooting down as well as this rising up. So the feminine is just so different than kind of how we think of her. She's expansive. She goes in all directions. Whereas the masculine, again, very linear, very singular focused. Yeah. So it's just a little bit different in that respect as well. So I'm trying to think where to go with this. Yeah.
I have a question for you. So for someone who is like hearing this information, it's like, oh, you know what? I am very in my masculine all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Once we have that realization, what's like a simple way to start to try to create more balance? Like, what's the first step here? How do we do this?
Yeah. So
How do we be this?
How do we be this? So it's a combination of being and doing, right? So in order to be, we have to do so that we feel safe. And so if we don't have a masculine, I always think of the masculine as a cup of water or a cup with water in it. So the masculine is the cup, and then the water is the feminine within. So the cup really offers a support. It offers structure. It offers form. So without that cup, the water just is kind of formless and everywhere. So we really need the masculine containment so that we are safe, we're protected, right? The masculine is the protector, so that we have the ability to be free in our feminine. So if you don't already have that in your life, you will show up in your masculine in order to compensate for that lack so that you're safe first and you're protecting your feminine. So we have to create those masculine systems, relationships, whatever it is in your life. So this is not necessarily talking about like a husband versus a wife or man versus a woman, although that is actually very, 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 very important. You need that polarity, but in any part of life, having a system or a structure is the masculine. So that can look like grocery pickup. That can look like a super good CRM in your business. That can look like, even if you think of like nervous system regulating techniques or like being hugged, being squished, that is the masculine. That's like an action of the masculine to help soothe the nervous system so that it can drop down into safety. So it's a lot about seeing where in your life you feel like you have to show up in masculine, and knowing, like, you can ask yourself the question, if I don't show up in my masculine here, I'm afraid, ... What's the fear there? Like, what is it that you feel like you have to protect yourself from? And then meet that part, creating a system, creating a structure, whatever that looks like, whether that's, again, like a chore chart for your kiddos, whether that's a CRM, whether that's a project management system, whether that, like, if you're noticing that in relationship, like what is the thing that's happening in this relationship that's degrading the polarity that we've got going on. So it really depends. Like, it can look like so many different things depending on what area of life you're noticing this in. But the biggest thing, again, is the feminine energy comes first. So as you step into your feminine and you change how you be in a situation, you will get clarity on the ways that you need to have better structure, because you will have a lot more, it'll just be a lot more clear for you. So that's like kind of a big way to explain it, because it could be so many different things, but I think that's a good starting point at least.
Yeah. It's hard to be general when it's,
right. Yeah, it could be anything in your relationship. Yeah.
What keeps coming to mind for me through all of this discussion of this masculine and feminine balance is kind of like what you said at the beginning, how everything on a micro level, you also see at a macro level. Yeah. I'm thinking down to the micro level of birth, and how in birth there's this balance of masculine and feminine energy. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that and what that balance is and why that's needed?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, it just from like a basic animal instinct kind of way, for a woman to give birth, and she has to feel safe. And so we have to have that masculine containment. And maybe that looks like the midwife or the doula that's in the space, and she's holding that masculine containment. Like you and I as coaches, we're holding a masculine container for our clients to be in their feminine, quite literally. So the same thing happens in birth. Your support team is your masculine. It's that protectorship to make sure that you're super secure and you're safe, so that you can drop into all of that. Like, you go completely inward. And there's a saying that I love that talks about, for a woman to give birth, she goes to another realm and she brings back the soul of her baby. And every time I'm like, oh, that's so good. But that's literally what it is. In order for you to do that, in order for you to really drop that deeply in and bring your baby earthside, you have to have masculine systems. You have to have that masculine containment. So that can be the birthing pool, quite literally. Like, that's a really good example of it. The birthing pool itself is the masculine containment that holds the water and holds the woman and holds the birthing process. And like having that masculine, like your spouse, if that's something that you have, like his presence, his stability, he creates that foundation of stability for you as you are going through all of these different experiences and as you're stepping into this new mama role. Or deepening your new mama role if you are already a mom. So it's having those things allows you to have a more empowered birth because you know that you are secured. And when we look at indigenous cultures, women who go through ceremony, the men will be posted on the outside of the area where women are having ceremony because they're holding the space. They're creating a protective boundary. Again, they're making sure that they're holding a boundary between the evils or the threats or whatever on the outside so that the women can be in their sacredness on the inside. So the same thing applies in your birthing experience. You have to have that masculine containment. That's why a lot of women, they're like, I'm in active labor. I go to the hospital and all of a sudden they don't feel safe and their body shuts down. It's like, nope, not here. And it will resume when they feel safe. And so knowing what makes you feel safe, knowing where that masculine containment is that at home? Is that in a birthing center? Like, what does that look like for you? And then who are the people who are going to hold that space for you? We're not meant to do it alone. Is so important in that specific dynamic.
Mm. Yeah. And like you said, like safety is so subjective, right? What makes one person feel safe is not going to feel safe to somebody else. Hospital might feel super safe to one, and home or, the ocean might feel super safe to another. So whatever it is. This random question that we don't necessarily have to go down this route, but I just want to pose it to you and kind of get your opinion on it. Do you think the popularity of free birth could be like a response to our hyper masculine way of approaching birth, as if it's like, okay, I don't want to do that. I need to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and do it alone with nobody around. Like, where's the masculine in that? Is it the partner if they're there in a masculine presence? You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think I am of the belief. I mean, I think a lot of people go to like, oh, well, deers, they birth alone in the forest. And it's like, well, but we're not deers. We have a completely different social structure. And so I think having that containment of having somebody there is really important. And also I think to not have somebody there, like really, if you don't have anybody there, that is going to require you to show up in your masculine a little bit. And I do think that can interfere with the birth. I am not a mom. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but in my experience and in my work with other women who have gone through that, I think that we tend to pendulum swing. And so I think that might be, like you said, it might be a reaction to the opposite of it. And I think there's something in between, understanding our social structures, understanding that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, women have always birthed with people. We've always birthed with our mothers, with our sisters, with our community members who are women. I don't necessarily think that you need a man there for the masculine containment, but I do think that you need community there to hold masculine containment. So that's again, my super biased opinion, not actually having given birth, but that I was actually thinking about that last night. That came up. I saw a post and I was like, how do I feel about this? Like what would be, my take on it? But again, like every woman is different. Maybe if she hasn't gone through the work, and that's where this is such a bigger conversation, right? If she hasn't gone through the work of working the blocks, the misunderstandings around the masculine, around, her relationship with women, that's a big one for a lot of women, is like, oh, well, having relationships with other women is weird and it's like too emotional and whatever. So if she has any of those misunderstandings, that's going to influence how she chooses to birth. And so I think that it has a lot to do with that too. So it's like zooming out, it's so much more macro than just, is free birthing in your feminine or not? There's a lot of extenuating circumstances that I think have to be looked at.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting kind of topic. And I just find it so fascinating. That's all. Because I just see so much about free birth right now in my biased like social media world. But so I'm always thinking about these things.
Yeah. No,
okay. So we've talked a little bit about the kind of seasons of our monthly cycle. We've talked a little bit about balancing this masculine and feminine energy. So now that we have this understanding, how do we, like, what's the simplest, easiest way to begin to start paying attention to our cycles and living, syncing, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
living more aligned to our cycles? What's like the easiest way for someone who has not done this?
Yeah.
Is, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I usually start with. Number one is downloading an app that you can put your average cycle length into that will give you notifications just so that you start to get a reminder to like tune into your body. I really like Stardust. I think it's a hilarious app because it gives you notifications every day of like, oh, you're ovulating, better go talk to everybody you've ever met. Like it's just kind of like, it's just satirical and funny. So I like having something like that. This is not for fertility tracking purposes. This is not for family tracking purpose or planning purposes. It's literally just to start getting into a rhythm of checking in with your body every day. So I really like that app. The other thing that I recommend is just slowing down your work or your responsibilities at least the first day of your period, if at all possible. So that might mean getting a babysitter or having the husband take the kids for a couple of hours on the first day of your bleed, but really starting to set the tone for like, I'm going to honor my body and its need for rest, because that starts to build that trust muscle in your body of like, okay, I can actually like relax into this. And how you rest like the quality of your rest dictates the quality of your energy in other phases. So the importance of rest in your menstrual cycle is going to influence how these other phases show up. So that's really important. So like non-negotiable, if you can start with two things, it would be get an app on your phone and just try and dial down the activity for the first day of your menstrual cycle menstrual phase. Those are really, really good places to start if you need just like super duper beginning. And then like the next step after that for me is really tuning into what is your energy doing every single day. And maybe doing a journal entry or maybe just tuning in and just making that a ritual for yourself. Like, what is the energy that's present? Do I feel very social? Do I feel communicative? Do I feel very introspective? Like what's going on in my body? And just start to notice patterns. And then that will allow you to start aligning with those patterns because your body is going to be different than mine, right? So just starting to really tune into the body sensations is going to serve you well. And then looking at cycle syncing education, what is there? What stuff do I want to start being aware of? It's important to know when you get into your luteal phase, you need like 300 more calories in your luteal phase. So if you start getting hungry, making sure that you're actually eating that is going to really support you in your menstrual phase. And it's going to help you stop binge eating if that's something that you struggle with. Like really tuning into things like that and educating yourself around how your biology works, and taking responsibility for that is really powerful. That's powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, it's so simple. It's like, well, just tune into your body. Like what's happening today? But for a lot of people, that is really difficult, right? When we've lived so disconnected from our bodies. And, I just kept thinking of my own experience with tracking. I think I've been tracking my period in apps for many, many years, mainly to just know when my period was going to come in the beginning. And then when I was trying to get pregnant, it turned into this really, like thinking back on it now, I took such a masculine approach to trying to get pregnant because I was a nurse at the time. I had all of this knowledge of the cycle and how pregnancy works and how it's going to happen. And I tested my temperature and, I did all these things because it was taking air quotes, a long time on my schedule, right? I wanted it now.
Right.
And it's funny because I think in that masculine approach where I was tracking everything, I was testing, my fertile fluid, I was, just every possible thing.
Yeah.
I think in that masculine approach, I wasn't allowing myself to get pregnant. Like it was all so dictated. And in my mind, it was like, well, this is the smart way to do it. It's science. Like this is how it works, And it ended up taking over a year to get pregnant, but it did happen. And the funny thing is that it happened only when I finally got a referral. This happens to a lot of people. I know I got a referral to a fertility clinic because again, in my mind, I was like trying to prepare myself for the worst or like for not the worst. It's not the worst to have, to have help. But in my mind, I was trying to prepare myself by saying, oh, well,
Yeah.
if you need a little help, that's okay. That's okay. So
Mhm.
only did I get pregnant once I had that
Yeah.
appointment in my hand.
Yep.
And then I was able to relax and surrender and let go. And
Yep.
then my husband was the one that month to be like, oh, like it's time. You're in your
Mhm.
ovulation phase. Like,
Mhm.
let's give it a go. And I got
Mhm.
pregnant. So
Mhm.
it's like the extremely ironic,
Yeah.
but it also makes perfect sense to me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's where when you tune in, when you start understanding the masculine feminine polarity dynamic, if you're in masculine and you're pushing, you're not leaving room to receive. And I see women do that all the time, like exactly your experience. It's where as soon as I let go of the reins and I realize that I just have to receive whatever's there, then all of a sudden, cool, I'm in my openness. And to receive a baby, you have to be open. You have to be in receptivity. Otherwise, the body's like, oh no, we're not ready for this, apparently. So it's crazy how it shows up in the biology, excuse me, of like, you've got stress hormones that are going to tell you, like, nope, you've got all of the stress hormone. The cortisol is telling you you're running away from a cheetah. Therefore, we're turning off non essential processes like digestion and fertility. And then as soon as you're like, oh, I'm in a rested state, like women thrive in a rested state, men thrive in a challenged state. So that's how our hormones actually respond in our body. For a man, testosterone, cortisol, and adrenaline work synergistically. They actually work together. For a woman, cortisol and adrenaline drain us of our oxytocin. So that's our like happy hormone. So we don't thrive in a challenged state in our masculine. We thrive in our receptivity and our openness. And that is so key. As you rest, as you lean back, it allows for things to lean in. And we have to be able to understand that and really embrace that so that we can have like so that we can receive a baby. It's a lot about receiving. It's not us just making and forcing the thing to happen. So I love that you're like, yeah, I know exactly what this feels like on like an experiential level now. It's so true.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating how this is all connected, right? Like kind of like you said, like our energetics are connected to our physiology, connected to, yeah. And this, the other thought that kept coming to my mind there is that for a lot of women, getting into the energy of the feminine to receive
Mhm.
takes a nervous system that feels safe in doing that. So then I
Yeah.
love where and how somatic coaching plays
Yep.
into this. And this
Yep.
is exactly kind of why I personally went into somatic coaching,
Mhm.
because I started as a doula and I started
Yeah.
looking around and seeing all the messages that we were giving
Yeah.
women. You have to set boundaries. You have
Yeah.
to do this. You have to do that. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Why is it so hard for us to do that? For
Yeah.
some women to do that, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a level back here that we need to kind of
Yep.
dig through and
Yep.
play with. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love how it's all connected.
Oh my gosh. Well, and just peeling it then a layer even back from that, our nervous systems work differently than men. So our response to danger is not fight or flight, it's tend and befriend. So we fight or flight when we don't have that security up front. That's us going into masculine fight or flight. Our default is actually tend and befriend. If you think about like a classic TV, like movie scene of somebody getting mugged in an alley, if it's a man woman, the man is like, I'm going to fight you, or he'll run away, whatever. But the woman's like, here, what do you like? Take my purse, take my wallet, take my jewelry. Her response is to tend and befriend. And so not only do we need to know that about nervous system regulation, that our bodies do work a little bit differently, but then also when you cycle sync, you're not fighting against your own biology, and your nervous system naturally comes back into a more easily regulated state. That doesn't mean we don't need a perfectly regulated state all the time, and that's not healthy, but we're able to regulate and come to a healthy space in our nervous system when we cycle sync, because we're not trying to constantly push our bodies in the way that is completely opposite to how we work. So that's like that even like comes before nervous system regulation, which is why cycle syncing has been so impactful for so many women, because it's like if we're constantly waking up with an alarm clock and getting a dump of cortisol and adrenaline first thing in the morning, if we're not eating the amount of calories that we really do need to be eating, if we're over exercising and doing HIIT workouts and polar plunging and all of this stuff that was never studied on women in their reproductive years, those studies were done on men and postmenopausal women. Those are contrary to what we actually need. They're counterindicated for women in their reproductive years. So when we drop we have to work in a way that honors a male biology, our nervous system naturally is like, okay, I can like rest a little bit and I can heal again. So it's like it's in everything. It's crazy how deep all of this stuff goes. So understanding it's it's pivotal for women.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think that's a great place to kind of end here. So, Beth, where can we connect with you? What do you have on offer? Tell us about about what you'd like to share with us. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm found on Instagram and website at Rosewood Woman. So it's WOMAN. And right now I have 3 primary offers. So I've got a cycle syncing course, and right now the majority of it is in a free workshop replay. And so that's loaded, and that's in my bio on Instagram. So that's a really good place to get started. And that'll be around for another couple of weeks, and then I'll probably pull it down. So that's free right now. That's a good place to start if you want to understand cycle syncing. And then all of the resources on my Instagram, I have tons of stuff on there just for free. And then right now, my primary offer is a Gentle Business Jumpstart program, which is a 12-week program for women who want to start or scale a feminine focused business. So it's both feminine from the energetic perspective, but then also it allows you to cycle sync in your business, to work seasonally with the actual seasons in nature. So that's a really powerful next step if you are like, you don't want to recreate the patriarchal corporate kind of hustle in your own business. That's why I developed that, is to give you an alternative. And then also somatic coaching. And that kind of underpins all of my offerings to really help women come back home to themselves, understand what's going on in their bodies from a health perspective. Like why do we have so many issues with infertility or endometriosis or things like that? There is an emotional root cause to those things. And so somatic work is a very powerful way to address that stuff. So those are my three biggies. And then, I have another thing coming in January, but it's under wraps for the moment, but that'll be announced in December.
Oh, I'm excited. I can't wait to see what it is.
Me too. I'm excited to see it all kind of come together.
Yeah. Birth it, if you will.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be ever so grateful if you would leave a review on Apple or rate the show wherever you're listening from. It really does help this show grow and blossom. All right. See you next time.